Yo, so I like balls and Furbies. So I'm making a fur ball. I have this really tiny faceplate from way back when I got Jupiter's faceplate. And I've been saving it for the perfect moment. And then suddenly one day the ADHD hit hard, and instead of being a responsible college student, I had this strong sudden urge to make a Furby cuss. Traversed the depths of Amazon and found this voice module. I settled on this one specifically because it said it could hold multiple MP4 files and play a different one each time the button is pressed. While impatiently waiting for it to arrive, time to make a Furby ball pattern. To start us off with the base, I found a pattern online for a fabric beach ball. I printed out the panel for the ball, and then cut out a pattern piece for the ears. Except now, the rest of the pattern revolves around the sound module, which luckily showed up just today. This thing is beautiful, but very flimsy looking. Lots of wires and easily breakable bits here. So, we're designing a protective case for it. I took some measurements of the pieces of the sound module and made a box that they could fit snugly in. I think they'll come out looking nice. I added in 2 holes, one for the plug to charge and transfer files into the module, and another to thread the button and its wire through. Speaking of the button, I also threw together this nice cradle for it to settle in. It's made to be sewn into the back of a fur ball so that the button isn't just flailing around freely. Using one of my college's 3D printers, I printed out the cradle, and it came out pretty nicely. The button fits in nice and snugly too, and is removable for when it is necessary, like if I need to wash the furb or anything. I was going to print out the box too, but then I saw the print time. This wouldn't be much of an issue if I was using a printer at home, but doing long prints at the college, where I'm not the only one using the machines, that's kind of very inefficient, so instead I'm building the box myself. Now I make some delicate cuts and partially dismantle a box of band-aids. Then, while my hot glue gun's heating up, I cut out the same holes in the model, including the port, the hole for the button, and a vent light thing for the sound to travel better. Then, I hot glue a couple panels together for stability. I ended up full-on attaching another box, so this thing was a bit less likely to just fall apart. Now, both to slightly cushion the blow of one of the few harder bits of a fur ball hitting someone full force in the face, and help secure our creation, I glue on a strip of felt. It's not the prettiest thing, but it's what's inside that counts. No, literally. It's time for the big moment when I finally internalize all the internals. And there we have the sound box. However, the length between the button and the box is a bit small for our purposes, so let's try an experiment. My major requires me to take an electronics class, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to get into it yet in the 2 meager semesters I've been here. However, I did some research, famous last words, and was able to get a hold of one of the TAs for that class, and he gave me this wire, which I think will work perfectly. If I'm understanding things correctly, it's a matter of making wires and specific metal bits connect securely in the right places. I had to do a lot of fiddling off camera and tried wrapping the ends of up all the wires around the button pins. And then fumbled the bag. Rest in peace, button pin. But I was able to yoink a new one on Amazon for relatively cheap. It came with 19 extras, and was a lot smaller than I expected. So I modeled a new cradle. I designed this one to have the button slit on a tiny bar, and when the fabric to the side gets peeled back, it can slide through the opening in the event that I need to remove the sound module. One cradle modeling later, and I decided that I needed to make sure the sound module that I've worked on and off for a month actually stays together. So I got this guy. Turns out you can get a soldering iron for $10 on Amazon. I figured out how to work this thing, then did my work off camera because safety reasons. Unfortunately, first time around didn't go so well. It's easy to get solder onto pins, but not onto stranded copper wire. So, I went back to my school's computer lab. I originally went there for a new wire, except I found a new button, made a new cradle, and then we solder. I then attached the other end of the new wires into their place inside the sound module. Now that we finally got this thing put together, it's time we make this Furby say things. So I scoured the internet for a few files, and created a few myself. And we're ready. Well, that was a quick tangent. Let's get back to making this Furby pattern. I took my 2 little pattern pieces and cut 8 ball panels out of fleece, then the outsides of the ears using the same pattern. I cut the insides of the ears using a neat little fabric I got from a thrift store. I sewed 3 of the panels together, and then I sewed together each ear, turning them inside out into these funky little shapes. I pinned these guys into place, one on each side of the panels, then sewed them down with another panel on each side. After that, I sewed 1 more panel onto each side of the fur ball, which leaves us with this. It also leaves us with 1 panel to go, the one directly in the back. Here's where things get complicated. I cut a big old 13 by 5 inch rectangle out of a long scrap of fabric. I folded it in half and then sewed one of the long sides together. On the other side, I marked the space for a little hole and sew around it. Luckily, there's a finish on this side of the fabric anyways, but had there not been, I'd highly recommend finishing the edge of the hole, especially if you're working with an easily frayable fabric. Now, I take a zipper, cut it to size, and sew it to the edge of a weird little pocket. This is where a sound box will go. First though, we need to attach the button cradle. On our last panel, I mark where I will have the slit for the pocket and a T shape for the cradle. I hem the bottom of the T, then position the cradle so that the side opening is under the hem. I do a lot of sloppy sewing to attach it all together from the underside. Then, I sew the zipper on. It was really finicky, but I think I made something decent. I think it looks pretty good. Setting that aside, we're going to turn our eyes back to the front for a moment. I cut out a circular shape from felt, cut partially down the middle. I pin it onto the furb, position things the way I want them, and cut the middle incision to where it would be somewhat more round. I sew down the middle and then proceeded around the entire perimeter of the felt. Perfect. Now it's time we turn to the face of this project. The face! In order to make it easier for this guy to stick on later, I sand the back of the faceplate to give it some tooth. I layer up various paints onto the face. Then I spray on a layer of sealant and add some nail polish to the pupils. I use this color. It seems very pretty and it makes me think of stars. I nudge this stuff around into all the crevices in the eyes while being extremely careful to not let it leave the pupil. I did have to touch things up a little bit after the nail polish, which took a lot of building up, but I'm loving the final product. And after a final layer of sealant on the face, I trim the fur on the area of the body where the face will be attached. Now, I slide a small piece of cardboard about the size of the face directly under the spot on the fabric where we intend to glue the face. Before I put on the hot glue, I went ahead and scratched up the back of the faceplate some more with an X-Acto knife to give it some more tooth. Hopefully it holds on better this way. Then, I apply plenty of hot glue and press it on. After our hot glue adventures, I partially sew on the last panel, turn our Furby skin inside out, stuff the orb, then sew it shut. Off camera, I grabbed a bunch of shades of purple and blue wool and felted them into the stomach. I've been really into needle felting lately, and this felt looked like a cool way to incorporate that into this project. I went with this palette of colors to complement how Jupiter's moon, Europa, looks in real life. While working on that, I also decided I needed to redo the connections between the button and the wire that connects it to the voice box. Turns out, when you give a college student with no experience a $10 soldering iron off of Amazon, you're not going to get a good product. And this definitely showed what the button worked only half of the time. After I removed the voice box, I took apart the connections I made, and then I found some of these crimp style pins at my college's whole computer lab, And so I put those onto the end of the wire pins, and then I had a friend hold the button in place, then use some tweezers to bend the connectors in place. Now, the button works every time.
Welcome to Asthma Jams, the music show for cool kids with asthma. Shake, shake, shake that medicine.
Before I put this bad boy back in, I whittled away at the button cradle a little bit. As its design was half-baked and extracting the previous connection disaster made me realize it was way too tight to work well. It's a good thing that X-Acto knives solve everything. It isn't perfect, and the button is still off-center within the cradle, but everything is a lot more workable now, and I've been working on this thing for months. I'm happy with it. I securely wrap up and position the structure with hot glue, then wrap it with electrical tape. As a side note, I did end up replacing this with a 3D printed part later for extra stability. Then I run the wire through the hole in the funky organ pouch. Then we set the button into the cradle. Now, with this operation complete, I think I can finally say we're done. Our voyage across the stars now leads us to the Milky Way galaxy. Zooming in closer, we center our sights on the large red giant Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system. Out of the corner of our eye, though, we see a much smaller round body orbiting the planet. This guy took me way too long to make. I do think it's worth it though, as this furb is absolutely furbalicious. Like, look at this orb. Totally orbular, forbular, if you will. And it's very yes. Very yes. Fuzzy belly, brown ears, tiny face, a galaxy within those eyes. Please focus, camera. I absolutely love this child. This is Europa, named after one of Jupiter's moons. You can probably tell that from what just happened. This was a fun project to work on. I really enjoyed this entire process. Okay, maybe really enjoyed is a stretch. There were some parts where I was pulling my hair out just a teeny weeny bit, but for the most part, yes, Furb. And this has been a great first deep dive into electrical engineering. If there are any actual electrical engineers watching this video, I am so sorry. But yeah, I've had fun, and soon I'm going to be taking some actual electronics courses, and probably trying to learn on my own independently. So who knows, maybe I'll be incorporating beginner level electronics in my next project. And I really enjoy this Furb. Plus, it makes a great rickroll grenade. Ever wanted to commit planetary Furby violence? Get yourself a Europa today!